Hello and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amy Hamlin. I'm the executive director and co-founder of the Coalition for Healthy School Food. We are a nonprofit organization. Next slide, please. And I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Angela Crawford, who is a clinical psychologist and an author of the amazing book, The Vegan Transformation. And her contact information is there. We'll put it in the comments too, but you're welcome to grab a screenshot of it or take a picture of it with your camera. And Dr. Crawford has a fantastic presentation for us, and so I will let her introduce herself and take it away, Dr. Crawford.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit and share a little of my background before I dive into the presentation, because my own background plays a role in why this topic has particular interest and relevance to me. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I worked as a psychotherapist for over 25 years. And for most of that time, I worked with things like stress, depression, anxiety, trauma, and health issues that people were dealing with. And through all that, I've always had a passion for holistic health and fitness, both for my own life as well as helping my clients. But at the same time, there was sort of this disconnect where I cared about health and different lifestyle practices, and yet I didn't eat the healthiest diet. And, certainly through most of my life was a chocoholic. I remember as a child, I was referred to as the M&M kid by my parents. And that continued, into my teens, 20s, and 30s, where I just was eating a lot of comfort foods, convenience foods. I didn't like to cook. And I rarely thought about nutrition, but when I did, I was confused, as probably many of you might feel also, by all the conflicting messages I would get in the media about nutrition. So, I just kind of ate what was really convenient. I tried sometimes to be healthier, but just most of the time ate kind of things that weren't so super healthy and wasn't that great at helping my clients with the nutrition because I myself didn't really understand it that well for many years. And I'd say in my earlier years too, I sometimes struggled with a low grade kind of depression and anxiety, not enough to maybe need treatment, but it kind of affected daily life from time to time. And then I had sort of a transformation in my life where I would say in my early to mid 30s and definitely in the 40s, I started shifting into a healthier way of eating and living. I got more consistent with exercise, and that made me want to fuel my body in healthier ways. And and then as I started to eat healthier, I happened to see a program on PBS about workers in a meat processing plant. And a lot of these workers were immigrants who felt like they had few other options for employment, and they were just having frequent injuries from the nature of their work. And as I learned about how the workers were treated in this type of work in animal agriculture and meat processing, I just had a lot of empathy for them because many of them, even though they were having these injuries, their employer wouldn't let them take time off. This big agriculture corporation wouldn't let them take time off or they'd lose their jobs and their livelihood. And it just got me thinking more how my food got to me. And I started to look more into plant-based eating and moved in that direction towards a plant-based lifestyle. And as I did that, I moved from someone who did not like to cook to actually enjoying creating meals and cooking food and trying new foods that I hadn't really eaten before. And I started to feel better. I had more energy, better health, and my emotions seemed more balanced out. It doesn't mean I don't have sadness or you know, ups and downs with stressors in life and in the world, but it seemed like I had more resilience to handle those with more of a sense of well-being. And also, interestingly, as I ate more fruits and vegetables and healthier foods, I also didn't have as many of those cravings to eat, the chocolate and the sweets that I had been eating so much before. And it just seemed easier to make the better choices, the more healthy foods I put in my diet and kind of made my lifestyle centered around those, the less I really wanted the foods that weren't so healthy. And because it made such a positive change in my own life, and I started to see how other people had healing from this way of living and eating, I went on for certification in plant-based nutrition and also began studying lifestyle medicine, which is a branch of medicine that centers around lifestyle practices and healthy nutrition. So again, before I dive in, just one thing that I think that's important to note is just a little disclaimer. I think it's always important to realize that while the materials here are based on peer-reviewed research, the things that I'll be sharing with you, it's never a substitute, though, for your own professional medical advice if you're dealing with medical or mental health issues. So always seek the advice of a qualified health professional if you have questions about a medical or mental health condition. And it's really also important to note that if you're taking medications for a medical or mental health condition, that you let your doctor know about any dietary changes, especially if you take medications for high blood pressure or diabetes. If you really change your diet in a healthy way in the ways that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation, your need for medication can change very quickly. And so that can lead to an emergency, actually, if you're not making your doctor aware of the changes in medications, because you can actually improve your blood pressure and your diabetes with, dietary changes that are similar to those we'll be talking about. And of course, talk to your doctor, before making any changes in any medications you take. I think it's safe to say that mental and emotional health impacts all of us, whether it be in minor ways or major ways. Whether you have minor kind of dysphoria from time to time, or whether you've suffered from a more severe mental health challenge, or whether you have loved ones that struggle, or your students. We see it around us, and it's really hard to not have some impact from mental health challenges. And it's also true for most of us that we are facing a multitude of stressors, both globally, nationally, and personally, from how, the weather changes and effects of climate change to viruses and pandemics that happen, wars and violence, division and polarization. Some of us may be having a loss of our sense of connection and community related to a lot of this stuff. And, we might have our own personal stressors and health crises in addition to those, beyond us that we see in the news every day. So I think it's a time of heightened stress for many of us, for both us as adults as well as the children in our lives. And over time, rates of depression have been increasing since 2015. They really went up during the COVID pandemic in 2020, but they've continued to rise even since then. So it's just kind of this continual building of rates of depression over the last, 10 years or so. And, these mental health challenges affect children as well. This particular graph is from the CDC looking at the years 2022 and 2023. And the green bar represents children ages 12 to 17, so the teenagers. The yellow bar represents kids 6 to 11, so kind of the middle ages. And then the young ones are 3 to 5, that's the blue bar. And as you can see, ages 12 to 17, really have higher rates of anxiety and depression. And, some of the kids that are younger might struggle more with behavior disorders and sometimes anxiety as well. And here's like another chart that expresses this a little bit differently. This is looking at symptoms that kids reported, teenagers, ages 12 to 17, between 2021 and 23, and 20% reported some symptoms of anxiety over the past 2 weeks. Nearly the same amount reported symptoms of depression in the past 2 weeks. and 40% reported having feelings of sadness or hopelessness sometime in the past year. So these kinds of symptoms are pretty common in kids and perhaps especially in teens. So what we're really going to be getting into today is what's the connection between food and mental health? And it's really important to note that this connection goes both ways. I'll be talking more about how food affects our mood, but it's also important to note that our mood also can affect our food choices. And probably if you think about your own life, you can relate to this a little bit. That when, you're feeling depressed or anxious or stressed, it sometimes, might pull you to make less than healthy food choices. A lot of these foods can look pretty appealing when we're feeling stressed or rushed or anxious. And often we might know that, okay, that salad with the colorful vegetables would be the healthier choice, but we find ourselves pulled to make the decisions that give us, the big dopamine boost, like that milk chocolate on the right there, or other foods that are not so healthy for us. So, which foods are most beneficial for our mood? So, the strongest um, area of research about this is looking at fruits and vegetables and how these are associated with our emotional and mental well-being. And a lot of the studies are correlational, which means they're looking at the relationship between our mood and emotional well-being and the fruits and veggies that are consumed. So while it can't prove causation, there's enough studies that show this relationship that makes it seem that it's a pretty strong connection. There's meta-analyses, which are review studies that look at dozens of other studies, and they find that the people that are eating more fruits and vegetables report lower levels of emotional distress and greater levels of emotional well-being. And when they look at fruit and veggie intake over time in what are called longitudinal studies, they find that those who are eating more fruits and vegetables now have lower levels of depression later. And for the optimal mood boosting effects, they find in a lot of these studies that somewhere between 7 to 11 servings of fruits and veggies a day are most optimal to get the best benefit for improving mood. However, as I'm going to share in the next slide, any improvement can make a difference. So, not to be overwhelmed if you can't immediately get to that 7 to 11 servings, even moving in the direction of more fruits and veggies can make a big difference. Here are two studies that were done with young adults, and the one on the right called On Carrots and Curiosity. What they found is when they asked young people to fill out journals every day about their eating patterns, they found that the young adults who ate more fruits and vegetables had better ratings of things like positive mood, purpose, meaning, curiosity, engagement, creativity, all the things that we'd like young people to have more of. When they ate more fruits and veggies, those different kinds of emotions were increased, these positive kinds of mood states. And they also found, for those same people that they were having fill out the journal, on the days they ate more, they had better mood states on those days. So it was something that could change pretty quickly just based on how the person ate that day. Now, the study on the other side of the screen, Let Them Eat Fruit, that was a randomized controlled trial. And what that means is they randomly assigned the young adults to different categories where one group just ate as normal, one group was given food vouchers and encouraged to eat more fruits and veggies. And then the third group was actually given two extra pieces of fruit or vegetables a day. And the group that were given the two additional fruits and veggies a day to consume on top of what they normally ate had improvements in motivation and psychological well-being and flourishing and vitality. So these really point to that even small changes can make a big difference for young people and for us too, whatever age we are. So there's a lot of research that shows that plants have a healing benefit for us for many chronic diseases that exist. Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn have shown through research that people can prevent and sometimes even reverse severe coronary heart disease and type 2 diabetes with a diet that's based on whole plant foods that is low in fat, low in and avoids oils and has lots of variety of whole plant foods like fruits, veggies, um, legumes, and whole grains. And also, a whole plant food diet has been shown to reverse risk of autoimmune disease, some types of cancer, and even to address early Alzheimer's disease or cognitive impairment. So it's not surprising that what research has shown to be good for our body can also help our brain and our nervous system. So what do I mean when I talked about, research shows that a whole food plant-based diet has helped to reverse heart disease and type 2 diabetes and some of these other chronic lifestyle related conditions? A whole food plant-based diet can be defined as one that it's based on unprocessed or minimally processed whole plant foods predominantly. And that includes vegetables, fruits, legumes, and legumes are beans and lentils and peas. And that also can include things like tofu and tempeh, and also whole grains, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. And we also throw mushrooms in there, although they're not technically a plant, they're a fungi. They fall into a plant-based diet. And generally, on a whole food plant-based diet, to get the most benefit, we want to reduce or avoid added oils, sweeteners, or salt. And some people have varying levels of how much they avoid the salt. Um, but the more kind of whole food and the more we avoid these added oils, sweeteners, and salt, the more benefit, especially for these reversing disease and extending cancer survival time. So, and also, too, if someone follows a really consistent whole food plant-based diet and avoids added salt and oil, they can normalize high blood pressure and cholesterol very quickly in many cases. Now, a whole food plant-based diet is a form of a vegan diet in that it excludes animal products, but when you hear the term vegan diet, it doesn't always mean whole food plant-based. It could include processed foods made from plant-based ingredients. So there's varying levels of how strict someone is with trying to eat more whole food. And then there's also lacto-ovo vegetarian diet, and then there's sort of more of an omnivorous diet, which the standard American diet is one version of that, which tends to be high in meat, dairy, and eggs and ultra-processed foods. And those ultra-processed foods tend to be high in sugar, fat, and salt. This is a really interesting kind of chart that really points out how do Americans eat? And this is from 2019, but I have a sense that it's pretty similar today. Um, Basically, the chart shows us the US food consumption as a percentage of calories. So it's showing us that 50%, 56% of the calories that Americans consume come from processed foods. And these are highly processed foods that have like added fats and oils and sugars and tend to be very refined grains. And so 33% come from animal foods, and that would include meat, dairy, eggs, and fish and seafood. And we need to note that cholesterol is found only in animal foods. So when we're trying to reduce cholesterol, that is found in animal foods. And they're also the primary source of saturated fat. So plant foods, unfortunately, are only about 11% of um, our consumption. And of that 11%, about half of it is less healthy plant foods like those found in French fries or potato chips or the apple in an apple pie, only half of that 11% are whole plant foods like the whole vegetables, fruit, legumes, nuts and seeds, and whole grains. So we certainly could be eating a lot more plants. That is, certainly not where the standard American diet is right now. And it's important to note fiber is a really important nutrient that's often lacking for many people, and it's found only in plant foods. So this kind of just gives some perspective of, how what a whole food plant-based diet is and what kind of our standard American diet tends to be right now. So continuing on in some of the research about what helps, our mood and what kinds of foods are associated with better mood. There are a lot of different studies that suggest that eating more plant-based is beneficial for mental health. And so one group of studies that relate to this are those that look at what's called the Mediterranean diet. And while the Mediterranean diet is not solely plant-based, it tends to be high in fruits, veggies, nuts, legumes, whole grains, much more so than our standard way of eating that I showed you in the chart before. And it's lower in meat and processed foods. And people who eat this way, and especially when they're eating more of the fruits and veggies and legumes, and less of the meat and processed foods, they're finding that people who eat that way have improved mental health and less depression. There are also some studies that compare vegetarians and vegans to omnivores that are correlational studies that do show less anxiety, depression, and distress. This area of research is a little more challenging to sometimes look at because often there can be a lot of different variables that play into this, but there are some studies that suggest less anxiety and depression and distress for vegetarians and vegans compared to omnivores. And then there was an interesting study where omnivores who were assigned to a group to eliminate meat and poultry for 2 weeks had improved mood scores compared to a control group who didn't change their diet. So even just in a 2 week period, they had some positive changes just from that dietary change. There's also been some studies done with people who work for Geico who were assigned to try out a plant-based vegan diet for a period of time for health reasons to lose weight and to improve things like diabetes. And they found that the group that ate the plant-based vegan diet had improvements not only in physical health, but also in their mood, less anxiety and less depression and more work productivity compared to those who continued eating their standard diet. And along the same lines, there's been some studies in a prison study where they assigned prisoners to eat a plant-based diet and others continued eating their standard fare. And those on the plant-based diet had changes in their behavior, being less aggressive and more cooperative and engaged, and also less recidivism, which means that once they were out of prison, they were less likely to recommit crimes and end up back in prison. So that was a kind of an interesting series of studies. Um, Also, an exploratory study in a substance abuse treatment program found that a group of substance abuse participants who were assigned to eat a plant-based diet as part of their inpatient treatment rated greater resilience and self-esteem compared to those eating the standard diet. It's also really important to note when we're looking at mental health and food, the impact of processed sugar. There's many studies that show that people who consume foods that are high in processed sugar, like baked goods, candies, sodas, other kinds of processed foods that contain high levels of sugar, they have a higher risk of depression. And studies that look at people over time find that, the more someone has processed and refined sugar, that it affects their mood later on as well. It's important to note that these studies that are looking at processed sugar does not include fruit. Sometimes people think, well, fruit has sugar and they lump it together, but the sugar in fruit is very different, and that fruit has fiber and antioxidants, and actually higher fruit intake is associated with better mental health. So as you're thinking about lessening your sugar intake, think of the processed forms of sugar like the baked goods and candies and sodas and things like that. And continue eating the fruit to kind of soothe your sweet tooth with something that actually will give you nutrition. So, how is it that whole plant foods help our mental health? There's a few different factors that may play into why they're beneficial. A big one is that plants have high levels of antioxidants. So when you see the vibrant colors of fruits and vegetables and other plant foods, those are indicating the antioxidants that are in those foods. And there's a variety of different kinds of antioxidants. Tomatoes have one type of antioxidant, carrots have others. But getting that variety, that rainbow of colors, is going to give you a variety of antioxidants that helps your body. And the antioxidants give your body this healthy balance of brain nourishing neurotransmitters. It sort of supports your neurotransmitters. And plant foods are much richer in antioxidants than either animal-based foods or processed foods. And also antioxidants help to lessen inflammation, which turns out to be really important for our mood and our well-being. You might have heard about inflammation. I think that's a topic that's coming up a lot these days. And it's important to note that inflammation in and of itself isn't bad. Our body has inflammation as a short-term response to illness or injury to help us heal. So when you have an acute injury or illness, your body's going to have inflammation to help promote the healing process. The challenge is when it becomes chronic inflammation, and lifestyle factors can play a role in that. Things like stress, lack of activity, and our diet all can contribute to chronic inflammation. And research shows that chronic inflammation can play a big role in a lot of medical issues, but also in our mental state and mental health issues. Having higher levels of inflammation is associated with greater depression. And whole plant foods tend to be anti-inflammatory. The antioxidants and other nutrients help the body fight inflammation, whereas animal foods, processed sugar, and other highly processed foods tend to increase inflammatory compounds in the body. So they can play a role in increasing that chronic inflammation and therefore may play a role in worsening mood or depression, as well as some other of our chronic conditions. Another really important role that plants play have to do with our gut. Some people have said that the gut is like the second brain. It's actually home to 500 million nerves. And when I first started researching this topic, I hadn't realized that our gut actually produced 95% of our body's mood boosting serotonin and half of our dopamine, both of which play a big role in our sense of emotional well being. And dietary fiber, which, as I mentioned earlier, is found only in plants, it plays a key role in our gut health and in mental health. Most Americans are not getting enough fiber. They find most Americans are getting less than 50% of the recommended fiber, and I would say often it's like a third or even less. So it's just between the processed foods, which have very little fiber, and meat, which has no fiber, we're just not actually getting enough fiber. And fiber is so important. It helps our gut health, our mental health. It fosters healthy digestion and healthy gut microbiome. In fact, some research shows that getting at least 30 different plants throughout the week in the form of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains, legumes, and herbs and spices, and even teas, getting that variety nourishes your gut microbiome so that it can be at its healthiest. Now, if someone isn't used to eating a lot of fiber, you might want to build up slowly. Don't overwhelm your system, but definitely working towards increasing our fiber over time can be a great health benefit and benefit our mental health too. In fact, I thought it was so fascinating. A study that looked at it reviewed a whole bunch of studies on fiber and mental health, and it found that each 5-gram increase in fiber can reduce your risk of depression by 5%. I don't know that many other things that can have that big a benefit. It's really amazing. And so, what does it look like to add 5 grams of fiber? I think it's very doable for most of us. 5 grams of fiber can include a small pear, a medium apple with skin, a half cup of beans or berries. Um, it can include broccoli, legumes, grains. All of this is stuff that we can easily do just by adding this into our diet. And if you were to do all of these things that are listed here on the slide in a day, you'd be adding about 25 grams of fiber. So this is a good one for us just to remember and perhaps be checking in each day. How can I add in that extra 5 grams or more of fiber to help with my mood and my emotional and physical well-being? And so many delicious foods can be made from plant-based um, sources. So a lot of the foods that we really love, like burgers and chilies and waffles and sorbets, and even cookies can be made in a much more healthy way from whole plant foods. Just about anything you love or your kids love or your students love can actually be made from healthy whole plant food ingredients. Often you can just kind of Google search what's a whole plant food version of this recipe, and you will be able to find it. So let's summarize some of this. So as we want to boost our mood with food, we want to first lessen the intake of inflammatory foods, which includes sugar, highly processed foods, and meat and dairy, all of which have inflammatory compounds. We want to increase our anti-inflammatory, high antioxidant foods, which are whole plant foods, colorful fruits and veggies, leafy greens, beans and lentils and other legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices. And among those whole plant foods, many of them contain things like folate, vitamin B6, and tryptophan, and other antioxidants that can really boost the serotonin and other neurotransmitters. So when you're getting lots of beans and greens and fruits, onions, soybeans and other soy foods and seeds, all of these things can really help boost our antioxidants and our neurotransmitters. And it is important to note this is healthier coming from the whole food rather than taking a supplement that would try to fill that in. It's okay to take a multivitamin, but you'll get the most benefit from whole foods. A few other ingredients that are important to note. We all need a source of vitamin B12. And whatever kind of diet you eat, probably all of us need a vitamin that gives us B12, usually a supplement or perhaps fortified foods. Because the way food is produced nowadays, it's really hard to get it from foods naturally. And at one time, plants had B12 because of the soil that they were kind of harvested from. But now the way we have to clean our food and things like that, we're not getting the B12 that we need from food often. So certainly if you're eating a plant-based diet, you need B12, but probably just about everybody does. And especially as we age, they find over 50 for sure, everybody should be taking a B12 supplement. And many of us who live in northern climates, we don't get as much sun exposure, so we may need vitamin D as well, which plays a role in mood and brain health. So that's something your doctor could test for to see how your vitamin D level is and whether you might need to supplement it. And we also need to be mindful of omega-3 fatty acids. Flax, chia, and hemp seeds provide ALA version of omega-3s. And also, it's many doctors do say it could be beneficial to take an algae-based supplement. Fish oils are a great risk to have mercury in them, whereas the fish actually eat the algae. That's where they get their omega-3s from. So you can take an algae-based supplement and get those same omega-3s without the risk of the mercury or eating the fish oil. One way that you can try to include more plants in your diet and make sure it's a varied diet that's going to give you a whole range of antioxidants, and these will help your mood as well as physical well-being. Dr. Greger has what's called the Daily Dozen app. You can find it on his website, or you could look on the App Store in your phone, and it's called the Daily Dozen app. And it helps you just track if you're getting enough fruits and veggies and berries and flaxseed and nuts and seeds and that sort of thing. Um, so there's 12 different things it has you look at, and also looks at exercise as well, just trying to get lots of movement because that's also important for our well-being, and drinking fluids. I do need to note that mental health is complex. In all my time working as a therapist, I don't think that I ever found that food was the sole answer for somebody, but I think it's an important foundation that is really overlooked in our culture right now. And it can make a huge difference because so many of us are eating the way I showed in that one chart, where it's just so predominantly processed foods and animal foods and so few plant foods that we're lacking important nutrients and we're lacking fiber. So, nutrition provides a really strong foundation that can provide the building blocks and sort of an inner resilience that helps us cope with life's challenges. And as I noted earlier, happened for me, I think when people eat these healthier foods, they're getting the nutrients they need, and there's a little less likelihood of going to the unhealthy comfort foods that might worsen our mental health. But it's important to note that we also need to take a holistic approach to our well-being, that we want to include the nutrition, but also look at other aspects of our lifestyle that can help our mental health. So be thinking about this both for yourself as well as your students. Am I getting exercise? Do I incorporate things like mindfulness or meditation, positive activities, time in nature, spirituality, whatever that might mean to you personally, social connections, a sense of purpose? Research has shown each of these plays a role in our sense of mental health and emotional well-being. There's a form of lifestyle medicine called, well, there's a form of medicine called lifestyle medicine, and it was developed by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine as an actual branch of medicine back in 2004. And so there are doctors that actually specialize in lifestyle medicine where that's their primary focus, is not just prescribing medicines, although they may do that as well, but they're also really trying to help their patients change their lifestyle in ways that can bring healing. And so that includes optimal nutrition, which they define as a predominantly plant-based diet, physical activity, getting plenty of restorative sleep, stress management, a sense of connection and relationship, and avoiding risky substances. So you can learn more about lifestyle medicine at lifestylemedicine.org, and also even find practitioners that specialize in this branch of medicine. So a few closing thoughts for you and your students. And you can think about this both in terms of your own well-being as well as how you might guide and support your students and your family and others around you. One is getting a variety of whole plant foods to nourish your emotional and mental health, and trying to avoid and limit inflammatory foods, including that holistic way of nourishing yourself by including exercise and other positive practices, relationships, and even play and time in nature can be so healing. And then you can also encourage the kids to eat healthy school foods, and you yourself can partake of these. There are actually plant-based foods on the menu, and this Friday there's some the adobo green beans and salad bar and rainbow bar. So, and other times there's things like the baked tortillas and the three bean chili. So there's lots of great options there that the kids or you can check out. So I invite you to think about what's one step that you might take away from this to help yourself and your students to improve your and their emotional well-being. What's a takeaway that you might try to implement in the next week, even if it's just looking at that fiber picture that I shared earlier and adding another fiber-rich food into your diet. So I want to just thank you. It was a real pleasure to be here. And I'm going to give this back over to Amy for a minute for a few closing words from her.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crawford. That was very informative. I really appreciate it. I want to make sure that everybody filled out the attendance form, and Kelly's going to put that link back there for you now. The attendance form is very important for you to fill out to get your continuing education credits. Um, so make sure that you fill that out. There's about 5 people who still haven't filled it out. The second thing I want to make sure is that Kelly will also repost a link to resources. So at first we didn't have it so that anybody could view it, so that's been fixed. So Kelly will also post that as well. So while you're filling out that attendance form and opening the link to the resources so that you can then bookmark it and save it, I'll just tell you a little bit more about the Coalition for Healthy School Food. We have been a formal partner with the Office of Food and Nutrition Services, and have worked with them since 2005 to increase plant-based options on the menu. And we partner with individual schools and we offer curriculum, educational resources, teacher lunch and learns, parent presentations, family dinner nights, and more. So, Kelly is going to also, well, she just did post the resources link, and at that link, well, I'm not sure which link she just posted. That might have been the link from Dr. Crawford, but there's 2 different resources links, so I need to clarify. One has information from Dr. Crawford, and the other one is a link to get access to our resources, which includes Wellness Wake Up Call, which can be read over the loudspeaker each morning, or if your school doesn't do verbal announcements over a PA system, they can be used in the classroom as well. And they're nutrition education in the form of easy to digest sound bites that just take 10 to 20 seconds per day. And each month is a different topic. And so there's 10 months of topics, and then it's a 3-year cycle. So there's 30 months of topics altogether, and each month also comes with a healthy recipe. So, Kelly, if you can um, put in that resource link to get access to our resources, that would be great. Next slide, please. And then another resource we have is Feel Good Food Cards. And Feel Good Food Cards are images of plant foods with 5 interesting facts and 2 more pictures on the back. And including usually one picture of what does the food look like when it's growing. And so we've got all the different plant food categories. So there are vegetables, legumes, fruits, whole grains, and nuts and seeds. Um, and these can be used in the cafeteria or in the classroom. And there's all kinds of activities, and they come with instructions about different ways that they can be used. Next slide, please. Um, and I want to reinforce that every single day in New York City school cafeterias, there are plant-based options. So every single day, there is peanut butter and jelly or sunflower seed butter and jelly, and hummus and pretzels. And on Fridays only, there's a rainbow wrap. And then, Dr. Crawford, if you can go back to this slide, yes, thank you. This one is actually, all of this is available this Friday. Everything is available this Friday, not just that bottom part. So that was my mistake. Um, so this is on the school menu this Friday for all to enjoy. So the VE means vegan, the V means vegetarian, and the foods on the menus are always labeled that way. Salad bar and rainbow bar, they don't say because they're mixed. But anyway, I think that is all. And here's the information for myself and Kelly. And if you're interested in having us come to your school to do curriculum, teacher lunch and learns, family dinner nights, any of the programs that we offer, this is our information. And Kelly will add our email addresses in the chat. Um, and we are going to do questions and answers. And so I want to encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A section. I don't see any other questions there. Dr. Crawford, is there anything else that you would like to expand upon or add? What did you have for breakfast today?
Well,
Just as
I
a
was traveling, so it was a little bit challenging. Today's not the best example, but often it might be steel cutouts and fruit and vegetables, or fruits, I mean, and maybe some nuts on top. We also sometimes like to have almond milk yogurt, with granola and fruit, or sometimes I make scrambled tofu if I have more time. You had shared a really great oat waffle recipe that I really love that only has a few ingredients and it's so delicious. It's like from whole oats and nuts and it's so good. So yeah, just I've been amazed by the wide variety of things that I've discovered. It's much more expansive than I'd ever believed.
one of the programs we did in some schools, and actually Dr. Crawford participated in this. We together taught sixth graders how to cook up in Ithaca, New York. And one of the things she mentioned was sorbet. Well, normally sorbet is full of sugar, but you can make the most delicious sorbet with one ingredient, and that's frozen fruit, frozen
Yeah.
unsweetened fruit. And all you do is you take that frozen fruit and you defrost it partially, but not fully, and put it in a food processor and let it rip. And you will have the most amazing sorbet. The students were, you know, some of the students were a little difficult. They wanted to not like the food, but they loved it. They
Yeah, they loved
absolutely,
that. Oh, they all wanted more of
yeah,
that.
wanted more. And then the waffle recipe, it's the easiest thing there is. You just do 2 cups of rolled oats and 2 cups of water in your blender, and that's it. You could add cinnamon or vanilla. You could add a little maple syrup, or you could add a handful of almonds or walnuts or other kinds of nuts, but it's just the easiest thing, and it's really like oatmeal in the form of a waffle, and it's so good. And then you could take some frozen fruit and cook it in a saucepan. Just let it cook down. You don't need to add anything at all. Put it on low heat, and then once it's all um heated up and liquidy and boiling just a little bit, you could mix just a little bit of cornstarch or arrowroot powder with a little bit of water, stir that in, and have a nice thick fruit compote to put on top of those healthy waffles. Okay, I'm going to go back to the questions and answers because it looks like we might have a few now. Um, if we want you to visit our school, can you work with any age group? Yes, we can. We can work with any age group. Um, and what kind of fruits work best for the sorbet? Dr. Crawford, do you want to answer that since you made that with the
Sure.
students?
Yeah, the ones that we had worked with in the school were either dark cherries, sweet cherries that you can get frozen, or mangoes. And I would imagine others would work well too, but those were the ones we used. We had to lightly let them defrost a little bit so they weren't super, super frozen, so they would blend better. So maybe let them sit out of the freezer for half an hour or something so that they soften a little bit, especially the mangoes because they're kind of bigger chunks. But once they softened enough that they could blend in a food processor, you just keep blending them until they soften enough that they become sort of in the consistency of a sorbet. They were really delicious and the kids loved them.
That's great. On our website, I'm going to put the link here. We have recipes, and the recipes are available in a family size version, and there are some great appendices at the end also that talk about how to cook without oil.
Yeah. I do the black bean sweet potato burgers all the time, and those are delicious. People always love them.
There's 2 versions. One is called Awesome Bean Burgers, and the other version is called
Happy
Happy
burgers.
Burgers.
Yeah, they're both good.
Yeah. So when you go to our recipe page, it's the first link and it says family size recipes, and there's a nice document that you can download and have all of our recipes, which are recipes that are also available in quantity versions for schools to use as well. And we have worked with New York City schools, and a few of our recipes have been added to the menu. Well, I don't see any new questions, so I think what we'll do is just leave a few minutes early. And I want to thank you, Dr. Crawford, for an amazing and informative presentation. We will make the slides available in the form of a PDF document, so I will email that to all of you. And I want to thank you for being here today. I hope that you found information that you can use for your own benefit and for the benefit of your students. And I would like to re-emphasize something Dr. Crawford said. On a whole food plant-based diet, your need for blood pressure and diabetes medications can go down so quickly that you could have a medical emergency. And that's why it's so important to make sure your healthcare provider is aware of the fact that you are making these changes so that they can adjust your medications. But some people who really follow it strictly are able to come off their medications in just a few weeks. So it's like you should, if you have high blood pressure or diabetes, you should definitely let your healthcare provider know before you change your diet, because even though it's an amazing thing and it would be healthy in the long run, if your blood pressure goes too low or your blood sugar goes too low, you could have a health crisis. So I don't want to scare anybody, but I want to make sure you know that's really important. And a lot of people have high blood pressure and diabetes. So I'm hoping that you got information here that will make you want to try this out. And there has been actual diabetes reversal, type 2 diabetes reversal, and it can happen. You can do it. Almost everybody with type 2 diabetes can reverse it. So I think and almost everybody with high cholesterol and high blood pressure can normalize their levels. And so it can happen pretty quickly, and that's the exciting news. But I think more to the point of this particular webinar is that this can really, eating this way can make you more emotionally resilient, and it can have an impact. So even though there's a lot of things going on in the world or at home or at work, um, it can help you be more resilient. And the studies have shown this.
Yeah.
So thank you very much
Yeah, and the
to
note
all
that
of you.
exercise and walking is also important too.
Oh,
So, yeah,
yes.
all of that is really true.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we really appreciate your time and participation. And thank you again, Dr. Crawford, and to my
Yeah.
colleague Kelly for helping out in the background.
Thank you,
Thanks so
everybody that
much.
was here. Enjoy the suddenly summery day that we have.
Thank you, everybody.